I always figured that I represented the more human portion of the program because almost everything I did, I backed into, and there with a certain amount of grace, claimed ownership later on. But my story, it has to do is driven by a couple of different things. I was a terrible high school student. It's like, even looking at you now, I get the shakes, because in elementary school and in junior high and high school, I was like the worst student in the world, and I had no skill sets. I didn't like sports. I'm tone deaf, so music was out. You can't read my handwriting, much less art. And so I was a really unhappy kid through the whole thing. And I was haunted by the fact that my sister, who went on to be a really well-known educator, was a year ahead of me. And so not only would things be bad, but the class would, once we started switching teachers, the class would start off with, "Louis Black, are you Annette Black's brother?" And the mouth of hell opened up, because he knew how bad it was going to get. So I was a terrible student, and wouldn't have been voted most likely to succeed. But I kind of had one saving grace. I was completely passionate about culture. I was into movies and comic books and music, and I was also into writing. And I was obsessed with this stuff. And so even though, my life was rocky, I upset my parents. I liked my parents. I would have liked to have made them happy. So high school was a terrible experience. I learned some things from that. But this passion kind of drove me. And strangely, I later ended up as like a star graduate student. It's like I had never been a star anything, a star graduate student in film at the University of Texas. And then one of the things that I also have always done, I'm real good about, is when people say, "Hey, why don't we do this?" I always go, "Yes." And also, sometimes when people are saying, "What I want to do is this is successful, let's do it." And so some friends said, let's start a publication in Austin called the Austin Chronicle, and it started out every other week and then went to weekly. And it seemed like a kind of impossible thing. I thought I'd be there for a year. It's 35 years next year. Time passes. But we started the paper, and it was in many ways a nightmare experience. But one of the skill sets that I hadn't realized I had learned so well in school was that I had a unique ability, not exactly to expect to fail, but I never expected to succeed. So when things went wrong, and things always went wrong, it would be like, okay, well, of course they're going to go wrong. Let's move on to the next thing. And my partner, who's arrogant in a totally different way, has never been wrong in his life. So whenever anything went wrong, he would explain how he understood that it had gone wrong, and if we had only listened to him, it wouldn't have gone wrong. It was a sweet scheme. But it was that, so I knew how to fail. But then I learned three other really important things: collaboration, community, and collective working together. The paper began to come together. It became one of the best it hopefully still is one of the best weeklies in the country. And we did it by working together and sharing our skill sets. And then some friends of us came to us in 1986. And they said, hey, let's start a little regional music event for 3 or 4 states around Texas, because this is before cell phones and before the internet. And so people had actually talked on the phone and never met each other. So we thought that sounded like a good idea, a little music regional thing. And we were like 4 guys sitting in an office day in and day out talking about what this is going to be. And that's where it comes from. And it's, and the audacity. I remember when we did the first mailing, inviting people to Austin, and be like, this is like a scam. We've never done this before. We're just saying come because there's going to be an event. They came and it was an event. And suddenly, South by Southwest kind of blossomed. So, and concurrent with this, because this is there's a lot of stories here, but they become one story. Concurrent with this, in Austin, there were a number of people whose lives were getting really interesting in certain ways. So there's a guy named Richard Linklater, and Richard had started the Austin Film Society. and his roommate was Lee Daniels, who was a cinematographer. And Lee came home one day, and there was 20,000 feet of film in the refrigerator, and they took that and they went and they made Slacker, which is an independent film that kind of changes independent film. And what's important, again, is that these guys are living in apartments where it was cinder block and boards. It isn't like they were in mansions. They didn't come from money. They weren't connected to the industry. They just went out and did it. We just went out and started the paper. They just went out and started South by Southwest. So Rick did Slacker, and then he goes on to do Dazed and Confused and School of Rock and becomes a well-known director. We have another friend named Robert Rodriguez, comes from a family of 10 in San Antonio. When he's 10 years old, his dad buys a big clunky video machine, and Robert starts shooting, little narratives using the machine. When he's 14, his dad buys a second machine. And Robert figures out how to edit from one machine to the other. And any of you who have ever done editing from like one same model machine to another, it's a pretty much impossible to do. And Robert figured out how to do it. And then he taught himself how to make films. And then he ended up making, ended up being in Hollywood. He made Sin City, he made the Spy Kids movie, he now has his own TV network he made From Dusk Till Dawn. And again, it started out making films at home with his brothers and sisters with this rigged up editing system and this camera his dad had bought. And then there's another guy named Mike Judge. Mike was a bass player in a band. He was a graduate student. He decided to change his career, so he came home one day and he drew a cartoon. He sat down at the dining room table and drew a cartoon, and it was Frog Baseball, and it was Beavis and Butthead, and he sold it to MTV for over $1 million. And then he went on to do Office Space and create King of the Hill, and he now has Silicon Valley on TV. And these guys all were working in Austin. Mike's more in LA these days. But what happens, and this is what's really remarkable, and it's because of Richard Linklater. Richard Linklater had created the Austin Film Society. And what it literally was, this is before he was a director, he just wanted to see films, and he had figured out that he had a nonprofit. He could get other people to pay for renting the films that he wanted to see. So in the early days, the programming of the Austin Film Society was films Richard Linklater would like to see. And now to some of you, the name should carry some weight. Boyhood, the film he did over 12 years, was an Oscar nominee last year. I mean, he's become a very important American director, but back then he was, scamming the nonprofit so he could watch Fassbinder. But he kept going. So even after Slacker, he stayed in Austin. And then then he began to become more active. So 96, he called me up and he said, federal and state funding for the arts is drying up. Let's create a Texas Filmmakers Production Fund. If I have a new movie, or my friend Quentin Tarantino or Robert Rodriguez or Mike Judge have a new movie, we'll do a benefit premiere and we'll take that money and give it away in juried competition. So he said, great. So he started, it's given away over $1.5 million since then. And the oddest thing is, I kept thinking it wasn't that much money. It would be like $1,000 to $5,000. If any of you have made any kind of serious film at all, that wasn't much. And it started still in the days where the technology was certainly changing, but film was more commonly shot on film. And I thought, what can this really mean? And then again and again and again, people would come up to me and say, because of that grant, I got other grants. Or because of that grant, we felt like we were making a film. Or I felt like I was a filmmaker. Or my family felt like I was a filmmaker. And this was something that filmmaker, Rick Linklater, who's a great American filmmaker, had decided to give back to the community. And then he brought in Mike and Robert so they would show their films and they would come and play benefits. And what had happened in Austin, really over the last 20 years, has evolved one of the great film communities in the world. There are Hollywood directors who live here. There's a major independent in Linkletter. There's a whole community of documentary filmmakers. There's a ton of animators. There's a whole bunch of game makers. And the bottom line is, so many of those guys started out not because they sat on the couch and said, what am I going to do next? Or I don't have access, or I'm not good enough. They went out and they did it. And the only way you really learn how to do it is by doing it. And may God bless you when you do, may you fail a lot, because that's how you really learn. I'm suffering a delusional state right now because I've produced movies over the years. I was a film critic. I was involved with starting South by Southwest Film, but I just co-directed my first film, and it premiered at Sundance. It's about Richard Linklater, so that's why I'm hyping him. It works for the film. It's called Richard Linklater, Dream is Destiny, and the film was incredibly well received. So this is the sucker time, because you begin to think, hey, I can make movies and people will like it. And then it follows up where it's maybe not so easy. But what really makes it happen, the bottom line is that it can happen, and it was kind of deliberate. And now there's a community, and you guys are part of that community. And you go out and you do it, and you work with each other. And literally, it's the future belongs to, we really wherever. South by Southwest, which now, is 10 days with hundreds of thousands of people, 4 guys sitting around an office for hours. Rick Linklater coming home, Lee Daniel coming home and finding a film, and he and Rick and 5 other friends go out and make Slacker, and he follows that up with Dazed and Confused, and then a few years later does School of Rock and Boyhood. So it's really an open invitation. What I'm saying is, we did it, and nobody knew that it was predestined. Nobody knew we were blessed. At one point in time, early on, Rick had snapped to the fact that when he started the Film Society, it was years before he did Slacker, and he had asked me for free ads, and I gave them to him. But at a certain point in time, he had snapped to the fact that if he hung out in the Chronicle offices and an ad dropped out, he could go to my partner Nick and go, why don't you make the Film Society ad a little bigger? Fill that space. And I was a raving lunatic for a very long time. That was my role in the whole play, was to walk through the halls muttering, and I would throw Rick out. Thank God he doesn't actually even like when I bring that up. But it was we were just kids together, and we persevered, and we supported each other. And that was the remarkable thing, was how deep and rich and committed that community was. But the bottom line was, and what still made it happen, was passion. When Rick and I became friends because we were passionate about film. The first time I talked to Quentin Tarantino, we became friends because we started talking about early Burt Reynolds. And we weren't talking Deliverance, which was a little too serious. We were talking Gator and WW and the Dixie Dance Kings and Seamus and White Lightning. And it's that passion, and I'm still driven by it. That passion brought together a community that shared that passion. And then they went out and very proactively just changed the way the game was played. So the whole point is moving forward in that direction in terms of creating culture. You can do it by yourself. Rick's first feature is shot entirely by himself. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with the biggest team you could assemble. But with the tools available right now, in this community, where you have things like the Austin Film Festival and the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival and numerous other film festivals, and the South by Southwest Film Festival, this is a town that you can create a career out of doing the kind of films you want to do, and it's worked really well for me. And so, go out there and do it and enjoy it, because if you're not having fun, it doesn't make any sense. Thank you.